I'm sure you're reeling, like all of us, from what happened yesterday in East London. 14-year-old boy was killed, several others injured, including 2 police officers after being stabbed by a man with a sword. It's one of a number of stabbings we've seen recently. This is more of a rampage by this guy. And I don't know what the answer is. Maybe we should give police officers guns so that they could take a guy like this out. You might have seen the shocking images of the suspect running through the area with the weapon. A 36-year-old man was arrested. He was tasered. And fair to say, the police got here pretty quickly. I think 22 minutes after the first call, they got there. I don't know if they could have got there any faster. What do you think, Carole?
What about them getting there faster?
Well, or just whether there's a way of them responding with guns straight away.
Yeah, policemen, police officers should not be expected to tackle lunatics like that, armed with just a taser gun and a truncheon in their pocket. To taser someone effectively, you have to be quite close. And you'll see that the woman police officer who eventually did taser him was pretty close to him. Now, when you have a knife this long, and yet you have to be a bit distance away to get, it's not fair.
Just watch the tasering moment. Sorry, Carole. Let's just see, because you'll see he goes out of shot here. So he moves that way. He's got his hood on, he's in the yellow, he's trying to get away from them, he's going to back off, he's got the sword, and as Carole says, the taser, there he goes, so he's been tasered. The taser physically is attached to the gun, because that's how it gets its charge. And you have to be quite close. Yeah. What do you think? Would you want those cops to have guns?
Well, I think in this case, he was arrested 22 minutes after, so the police did get there before that. And I think this is a case that doesn't happen every day, so I think saying that we need to give every single police officer in the country a gun isn't the answer. We need to look at why people like this are carrying out these attacks. We need to look at mental health in this country. We don't know the reason for this yet. The police have said that it doesn't seem like they knew anything about this man. He wasn't on their radar. But I think arming every single police officer with a gun, we've seen in America what that can do.
Well, why not? Why don't we? I mean, apart from anything else, this person would not be in jail for 35 years. I think
there are some police officers who don't want to carry guns. I think police officers should be allowed to decide whether or not they carry a gun, and if they want to do that, that's great. But you say we've got to look at why this is happening, and it doesn't happen that often. Yes, it does. It happened last year, 14,626 times in the city of London alone. People were stabbed. There were, of the 110 killings in London last year, 71 of those were because of knives. We have the worst mayor on the planet in charge of the capital city, who keeps on saying he's going to tackle knife crime and doesn't
because
do it.
Because you've made it political to London, and we've got local elections tomorrow. So let's not get into a big row about Sadiq Khan.
Well, but if you're talking about a knife attack in London, you have to look at the record of knife crime in London, which is shocking. It has increased 38% in the last 8 years, which is a shocking amount of time. Now, when people do get arrested for carrying knives, if they're arrested, and one of the reasons as well, I should say, that knife crime has rocketed is because stop and search has been reduced in most police areas, because we don't want to offend people by stopping and searching them. If this guy had been stopped and searched, this was in his van, this
Well, you're not going to stop and search somebody in a van to find a sword.
Well, never mind, if you've got nothing.
A lot of it is to do with gang-related issues in London. London isn't the only place this is happening. It's a nationwide issue.
I know that.
So a lot of it isn't just one individual like this. We're looking at gang issues. So we need to look at poverty. We need to look at youth centres that have been taken away.
Stop saying it because you're poor, you carry a knife. That's tosh.
It's to do with opportunities. It's to do with opportunities.
So you take a knife out, that's your opportunity,
A lot of research shows that young people feel in these places that they need to carry knives to protect themselves.
Which is why,
places and see why
which is why people should be stopped and searched.
Right.
And to hell with what they feel about that. If it stops that 11-year-old, if that was a 14-year-old lad getting killed, it's worth stopping.
You're right. I don't know whether any stop and search would have stopped this guy. We don't know much about him yet, but I mean, he could be just completely unhinged. It's possible. Let's bring in Chris Phillips, who's a former police officer, former National Counter-Terrorism Chief. Chris, hi. Do you think it's time to at least to make sure you've got 10 officers there, 8 of them have got weapons?
Yeah, good morning. Well, listen, I spent all my career up until this point, really, saying that I don't think police officers should be routinely armed. I never wanted to carry a gun myself, although I did for a little while. But I think society is changing, and I think the lack of respect for all sorts of things, whether it's doctors, whether it's teachers, police. That's a big issue in our society, and I think is getting out of control. And the number of knives and guns that are being carried on our streets is changing and has gone up. And I think we're asking our police officers to do an impossible job here. We're asking them to keep themselves and us safe, and not giving them the tools to do the job. And I know people will use the American experience of guns. Well, America's a completely different kettle of fish altogether. If you look across Europe, all our major cities in Europe, the officers carry guns as a matter of course, and it doesn't result in huge numbers of killings.
Yes, I mean, in that case there, what would have happened if they'd come with guns? They would have shot him rather than using the taser, I guess, and you'd shoot to kill.
Well, Jeremy, I don't think guns would be the first course of action. I think they'd try to use a taser, but tasers don't always work. And in particular, in a moving target, if you miss with a taser, you do have two shots at it, but you could miss him. And with a man with a machete or a knife, you're really you've only got split seconds to deal with the incident, and sometimes it does need a firearm to deal with that very quickly and dramatically. And of course, no one wants to see people die. But of course, if you're gonna whack people with a machete, then you have kind of given up your rights to live.
Well, for sure. I was overhearing a conversation between some quite young people yesterday about this, because it was all breaking and they were so upset about the death of the 14-year-old boy, understandably, but they were very down on the police not basically mowing him down with a car. So, Carole, there's an option as well. They were right near him with a vehicle.
Every time a cop uses a gun in this country, there's a monumentally big inquiry. The cops are criticised for using guns in circumstances where they could be killed. We've got to get rid of this attitude. Frankly, this lunatic with a machete, I don't care what happens to him. I don't care whether he's shot. I don't care. I don't care what happens to him.
Do you care if he spends 40 years in a prison? Because that's an expensive thing.
Well, if he's going for children and people with a 3-foot knife, I don't care if he's shot. Yeah. I really don't, because he could have killed more. It's only by the grace of God.
Jess, do you care if he's shot?
I don't care personally who he's shot. Obviously, he's done a very bad thing and he needs to be punished for that. But I think to say that we need to respond immediately, there was armed police force that did respond to this. They weren't straight away there. Mm-hmm. So do we need to train up more armed officers? But does it mean every single policeman? My dad was a policeman. He was a policeman in the Met. And very often he would go into situations only armed with a shield and have to disarm people. I very much respect the police. I think they do a very difficult job and put themselves on the line like we saw yesterday. Mm-hmm. But also we have to look at, why does every officer not have a taser? To start with, it comes down to police cuts. We cannot afford in this country to give every single police officer a taser at the moment. That is a main issue. We can't afford to give them a taser. We definitely can't afford to give them guns.
So, reporting on another channel that one of the officers was close or is close to losing her hand as a result of this. Chris Phillips, thank you so much for joining us. Have a good day. Thank you. Welcome back. We're live on Channel 5 with Jess and Carole. Later, should asylum seekers be allowed to work if they've been in this country for 6 months? At the moment, they can't. Some say that's unfair. We'd love your thoughts. But let's talk more about the appalling incident in East London where a teenager was killed. Several others were stabbed. A man had a sword. He's obviously in police custody now, but the 14-year-old tragically died. 2 police officers were injured. Now, I mentioned earlier, we're just getting some details. They have, it's very sad to say, suffered apparently horrifically serious injuries, according to the Met. One has been close to losing her hand. And some have said we're now in the grip of a knife epidemic. If that's the case, should we just arm all police officers? That's what we're asking. 0207 862 2222. Would that have helped? David in Shropshire, would that have sorted this out earlier?
Good morning, all. I think in a lot of instances the police should be armed. I mean, when people commit crime, we're too soft on crime now. When people commit crime, they know they can virtually get away with it and nothing will happen to them. And I mean, when people commit crime, it always seems to be put down to people having mental problems, which is a load of rubbish. Most people commit crime out of choice, not because they have mental problems.
Well, there's the case. We've had a couple of cases. There's obviously the Nottingham case with Grace, Barnaby, Ian, those 3 victims who were very, very nastily murdered by a man who then said he was mentally unwell. Yesterday we had reports of a guy who was in a mobility chair stabbed to death. And again, the guy said he had diminished responsibility and got away with that. So, David, do you think this guy will do the same, pull the same number?
Yes.
Yeah. Should we stop this, Jess?
It's not that easy, though, to just say, oh, I had diminished responsibility. Like, we have to put, if you say in the courts, you have to put trust in the courts. It isn't easy, and it also isn't an easy route to go through. Like I said, my dad was in the police. It isn't something to go, oh, okay, it's fine. I've got mental health problems. That's okay. You go live a nice life in a mental asylum. That isn't the case.
No,
so I think
you're not guilty of murder. That's the key thing.
Can I just say as well, we can't put our trust in the courts because we hear every single week stories of how judges and magistrates are given notice that they can't put people in jail because there's no prison spaces. That's not trusting the court. So you commit a crime, you're found guilty of it, but you can't go to jail because there's no space in the prisons. So that's not. How can we trust the courts? There's no space in the prisons,
but whose fault is that? Well, how do we fix that then?
Well, you build more prisons. That's what you do, and you put more people in prison.
Maybe we need to look at the cause of why people are going to prison.
Oh, well, let's stop
that in communities. You can't just keep building prisons,
Anyone who kills people or tries to attack people with a machete, yes, they're mentally ill, but it doesn't mean they should be excused for committing that crime. They should be excused. They should be locked in jail with all the other murderers. They shouldn't actually be put in a cushy hospital for 2 years where they get let out.
That is just a stereotype.
No,
it's what? It's not a stereotype. The two murders that have been killed with Grace O'Malley and Kumar and the guy before that.
They're not both of them hospitals to live a nice life.
Both of them, yes, they are. It's a better life than being in a prison cell in a normal prison. They get sent to a mental hospital, and the first one was let out after how many years? The first guy, couple of years, 3 years.
Who are we talking here? The mobility guy?
No, the guy who the people before Grace O'Malley. There was a guy sent to prison on mental health grounds. He was let out after a couple of years because he was deemed by some idiots to be okay.
Oh, you're talking about Valdo Calacane?
Him.
Okay. Yeah, so we've obviously, once you plead the mental health thing, you're on a different timeline. But it may be, as Jess says, that you're not. It's not cushy being in an asylum for people who've committed serious crimes.
Not an asylum like the old days.
Well, let's just show you a bit of a map and the timeline of what happened yesterday. And this is the Daily Telegraph have done a very good job of laying it out really clearly. It's all in quite a limited area here. So it starts in a van. And he runs into a house there at point 1, and then he drives the van in this direction here and turns right into this close here, all in Hainault, of course. And he's then out of the van, and it seems as if that is where this poor lad was killed, just in that area there when he gets onto foot at first. And then he moves down this way. He goes then over a rooftop there. He's then on foot, and that's where he's taken down by the police in this image here. So you had a period where he's loose with a sword and just making his way around the neighbourhood and has already killed and is extremely dangerous. Rob in Hampshire, would you want those police officers, the first responders, to have guns? Go, Rob. Okay, Steve in Newcastle, hi.
Hi, yeah, definitely have guns.
Bear in mind, you don't then have a court case, and I'm not saying that's a good thing. You simply are let because you shoot him dead. He's on the ground dead, and you never find out why or what or who or anything. Is that not an argument against him? Would you not want him captured alive?
Possibly, but what happens if the taser didn't work? Because sometimes it does not work. If he had a thick clothes on, it might hit his clothes and not actually go through. And then what happens then? He's going to attack more officers. He could attack that female officer and killed her with that sword.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out who these two officers, the two officers who were horrifically injured, according to the Met. I can't see in our timeline where he struck them. It might have been as during the tasering. I don't know.
You just said, should we not know why, how, who? I don't care. Not when the guy is intent on killing people. A trial is pointless because we know it's him. We know he did it. We know he was there wielding the machete. I don't care why, how, who. Get him, stop him before he kills more people. It really is that simple.
What's the answer? Do you think
the answer isn't just going around and shooting every single person?
Who's saying that? This is so typical. Did I say that?
Just turn along and then shoot the man dead. I don't care what
he's wielding.
You
sound like you're trying to make an excuse for a guy wielding a machete.
At all. I think it's absolutely horrific. And armed officers did arrive on the scene, they should have been first responders, so maybe we need to train more people.
Yes.
Is the answer given every single police officer
That's
in
all
this country?
No one is saying that. You keep on repeating
That's what the
this.
question is, though. Should we arm all officers?
Yeah, and we have said here on this
arm
panel,
every single officer.
and as has this officer, he's saying in certain circumstances. I said if the officer wants to carry a gun. No one has said every single police officer.
They certainly had a chance to drive a car at him, which would have killed him because he was right next to a brick wall, and they didn't do that. So police are there to preserve life when they can. There's no question. Let's have a look at the tasering moment here. Again, I don't know whether this is the moment where the female police officer nearly lost her hand, and we won't see that if that happens here because he goes out of shot, and he's with tasering you're semi-incapacitated, and you'll see he's going to be hit. He's going to turn his back right now there, so that's when he's tasered. She has to follow in because she's actually physically attached to him. He's still got the sword. He may be on the ground.
Yeah.
He may still be very dangerous. Maybe this is... It's funny because when we had tasers come in, everyone said, it's too dangerous to use tasers.
People still say, Jeremy.
If the alternative is guns, you'd choose taser, wouldn't you, ideally?
Yeah, absolutely. But also tasers are deadly weapons. So we need to just make sure we're training all officers. Unfortunately, we know that some cases, armed guns, tasers are deployed when they shouldn't be. So that's all I'm saying, that if we're going to give officers these, we can't afford to do it anyway. So it's a rhetorical question, but then we need to make sure that they're trained.
All right, after the break, we'll take more calls on this. Now, more calls on whether police officers should be armed after the shocking incident in London yesterday. And we're hearing more about the police officer's condition, which is serious. Ali's in Northamptonshire. Hi.
Hi.
Would you want, you saw like 20 officers there. What if they had 20 guns between them?
No way. Should not be. No, police officers shouldn't be armed.
Because you think they would end up shooting the wrong people?
No, because I think if all officers are armed, more criminals will be armed. My late father was a police officer, and it's something he felt strongly against. It was a conversation that I remember was brought up in a family, and he was adamant. And I believe that strongly too.
Well, Jess has got the same, perspective, having had your dad was in the force. He was against guns, was he?
I'm not entirely sure if he was against guns. Himself, he had to go and disarm people using just a shield. That's absolutely terrifying, and I think that some officers should be armed. I'm not against that. No. I think if we look at tasers, that would obviously be the first option, like in this sense. But given every single officer, like we're discussing here, I think that isn't the answer.
But Chris did say, didn't he, Ali? I don't know whether you saw, we had a former police officer on, and he said in years gone by, probably when your dad, was doing it, he would have said no guns. He said, but now everything's changed so much that it's not fair to ask coppers to go out without one, especially when the criminals are armed the way they are.
Yeah, Ali, back in the day, we all used this idea that, Britain's a bit special and it's a nice, calm country with lots of sheep and, rolling fields, and we don't have serious crime. Those days are gone.
Oh, yeah.
We absolutely know, don't we, that we have very, very wicked criminals in this country.
Yes, there are very wicked criminals in this country. But even today, if you arm police officers, you will find that criminals will go to commit crimes armed. Those that wouldn't normally be armed will be armed, knowing that if police are called, they will be armed. So they will already be armed.
Let's move on. Thank you, Ali. Thanks so much. Vic in London, hi.
Hi.
You agree with that?
Not really. So, as I mentioned before, I work for the Metropolitan Police as a volunteer.
Okay.
And I've been doing for some time. And we do exactly the same thing as what the regular officers do. We are frontline responders as well. So if an incident comes out, which, someone is armed or anything like that, we could be called out to it, whether they have a knife or whatever it is. However, we don't even have access to tasers being volunteers, even though we do the same role. So we could be in a situation where we turn up to a call and all we've got is our little sticks and sprays. Whereas, with full-time officers, they will have at least a taser gun. So if they were put in a situation like that, rather than waiting for other team members to come along, which have things like that, things can turn very nasty very quickly.
Would you want to have a taser for your job, Vic?
I think so, yeah. I think, as a minimum, nowadays, before, the crimes used to be different. Nowadays, people are not scared of the police when people turn up. It is a case of, look, there's no respect there anymore for police officers.
No.
Before, people used to listen, and it's just a different day now.
Thanks, Vic. The two-word argument against guns, Carole, is Wayne Couzens. Because you would put a gun on that man.
Yeah, he was a lunatic. I get all of that,
But
that
there
doesn't
are criminals
mean,
in the police.
That doesn't mean that the 99.9% of other officers have to be put in danger because of a maniac like Wayne Couzens.
Well, David Carrick then. He was the same again, had a gun.
But
threatened his victims with it.
I know that, but you're talking about lunatics, and it's not fair to leave all the other officers exposed. I think what Vic said, a really important point there. He said there is a lack of respect for the cops now, and people aren't scared of them in a way they used to be in my day. Seriously, if we saw a policeman come, my knees used to shake. I used to think, what have I done wrong? But no one feels like that anymore. They spit on them, they abuse them, they laugh at them. So yes, they should have something that puts themselves above that.
Oh,
yeah, but we don't want to live in a state where people are walking around with their knees wobbling because they're scared of seeing police. Police are meant to be there.
I wasn't scared because they had guns, Jess. I was scared because they represented authority. Now cops don't have any authority because people complain about them. They complain about if a cop admonishes them for something. In many ways,
I do see when I go to football matches, I'm amazed at the way just your average person talks to a police officer. I mean,
just
routinely effing and blinding at them. And I'm thinking, I thought that was arrestable, you know.
It should be.
Lisa in London, what do you think? Should the police be armed?
Definitely not, Jeremy. Nice to talk to you as well.
And you, Lisa.
Definitely not. I used to work for the prison service, and, nowadays it would just cause... How much mistrust is there of the police at the moment? I mean, it'll open a whole new can of worms.
Well, there will be very rapidly. Someone will be shot who shouldn't have been shot. We could probably all agree on that.
Definitely.
And that will spend. They will then, so the
you look
American cops. Go on.
You look at cases like Mark Duggan, who was shot. Okay, he was being under surveillance. There was no firearm in the minicab found. A man was shot dead. There will be more cases of this.
I was not even thinking of that. I was thinking, like in the States, they had some. I remember 10 years ago reading these twin women. Girls, were in a kind of flat share, and they called the police because they had an intruder, and the police blast in and shoot one of the girls.
Well, I saw that recently on Twitter. There's a girl who had been kidnapped. The police responded. She was crawling. Did you see that? And then she was shot.
In the car. Yeah.
Again, not saying that every single police officer is going to do that, but we have to be aware that could happen.
We don't want hot metal flying around.
But in many ways, we have the society we deserve now because we're always making excuses and reasons why not to. Lisa, you would expect the cops to keep you safe in this kind of situation. Would you really be saying what you're saying now if you were in that kind of danger? And a 14-year-old boy was murdered yesterday. This guy turned around and hit him in the face with a machete. We cannot have that on our streets. It's got to be. We can't.
Go on, Lisa.
But there's not enough. The police should be armed with tasers. Carole, you're not living in the real world.
Neither are you. Neither are you. Do you know how close?
This is London. You have no idea. I've brought children up. I've got 2 adult sons now. The amount of stop and search, mixed race boys.
Okay, let me tell you about stop and search. It's been cut by 44% in the past year.
Hang on, Carole. Let Lisa talk. Lisa, you're saying that stop and search made your kids' lives miserable, did it?
Miserable, Jeremy.
Really?
Miserable. I had to, on a daily basis, before going to work, tell him what to say. Don't antagonise the police. Don't answer back. He's literally getting his homework out on the grass.
Okay.
Emptying out his bags.
But children take knives.
Let Carole speak, Lisa.
Children take knives into schools now. So yes, your son isn't carrying a knife, but other children might be. And stopping and searching all of the kids, they're not just picking on your son, they'll be picking on other kids
problem
too.
because that's what they're saying in research, that they aren't stopping every single kid, and that they are black children that are being discriminated against. So that is the issue.
What about the Olympians who got stopped in the car? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Who, a young black couple, and the police pulled them over, and it all got very unpleasant. You just don't want to see a gun in that situation. I'm veering the other way now. Neil in Merseyside, are you a policeman, Neil?
I used to be, Jeremy. Good morning.
What do you think of this?
Well, I don't think if you ask the majority of police officers, I don't think they'd want to be armed. And I think if you went to the members of the public, I think that changes the dynamic between the police and members of the public who are here to serve. And we police by consent, don't we? We go on about, police officers should have been armed yesterday. I think there's a bigger issue around that. When they did turn up, they wouldn't have stopped that young boy, unfortunately, getting killed by the time they turn up on scene.
I'm afraid to say, and Jess has said this already, that if they got there within 22 minutes, that's pretty fast.
Yeah.
And he was dead by then.
Yeah, and they're not going to do that. And there will be mistakes, but you're not coming back from getting shot, are you? So what you would like to see is we'd like to take the knives off the streets and the culture around, kids going out, being armed, and carrying them as a matter of course, and carrying something that they think they need to.
Neil, how do you get the knives off the streets if you don't stop and search people?
Well, stop and search is just one piece of the armoury, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah, but it's important.
It is important, but it needs to be targeted and it needs to be intelligence-led. It can't just be randomly stopping and searching, because that then creates an issue between. It's generally the youth and the police officers who are doing it.
Okay.
So they need to have a reason behind doing it.
We've got to leave it there. I'm thinking, Jess, at the end of this, you're not at all convinced that we should have a single extra gun for the police, as things are.
Well, I don't think, maybe we need a few more trained officers, but I don't think every single police officer in this country should be armed. Absolutely not.
OK, thank you, Neil. Thanks to all our callers. Later we'll ask whether there's anything wrong with politicians using huge private jets. After the break, should asylum seekers be allowed to work if they've been here for 6 months? At the moment, they're not allowed to find a job here until their claim has been approved.